Tuesday, April the 9th. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Calling the roll, Mr. Greenspan.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Brady.
Here.
Mr. Germana.
Here.
Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Mr. Schron.
Here.
Ms. Conwell. Ms. Conwell is absent. Mr. Jones.
Here.
Mr. Rogers.
Here.
Ms. Simon. And Ms. Conley.
Here. Can we have a motion to mark Ms. Conwell as excused? She had a minor medical situation.
I so move.
Second.
In favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, the ayes have it. She may be here for the regular meeting, but it's about 50-50. All right, presentations. We have 3 presentations today, and they are all sort of involving the ecology. So this is our ecology work session. And are you Ms. Goodman? I am. Okay, would you like to come forward, introduce yourself, and is this your materials? This is, okay, and you're on. Thank you.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jane Goodman. I am Executive Director of the Cuyahora River Community Planning Organization, which is the 501c3 nonprofit that manages the Cuyahora River RAP, Remedial Action Plan. Most of you, if you've heard anything about the restoration of the river, have heard of the RAP. We are the parent organization. So, and for those of you who don't know, in the interest of full disclosure, by night, I'm councilman in the city of South Euclid. I feel your pain. I guess we'll just begin. So, well, I need to give a little bit of background. We are one of 43 areas of concern that have been designated as the ones that most contribute to the pollution of the Great Lakes. And this is our area. The blue and pink colors are what's called the RAP area of concern that need the most cleanup. It's the area from Akron to Cleveland. We also take care of the rest of the river by virtue of the fact that we are one of 14 American Heritage rivers designated in 1998 by President Bill Clinton. Those subwatersheds, all of you live in one of these subwatersheds except those on the left-hand part of the screen that are in the Rocky River watershed. We do work with Rocky River watershed and with Chagrin River watershed, which we encompass. We also take care of not only the river, but the 10 miles of Lake Erie near shoreline, from Edgewater to Euclid Creek, to and including Euclid Creek. And it is our mission to remove a certain number of beneficial use impairments, problems, challenges. They have to do with fish. They have to do with the organisms that feed and support the fish. They have to do with dredging in the ship channel. And all of that sediment comes out of the tributaries in your backyard, and your backyard, and your backyard, and my backyard. Eutrophication, that's nutrients. You're hearing a lot about the problems in Lake Erie having to do with excessive nutrients that flow across the land and into streams, creating algae, some of it toxic, all of it not helpful. Beach closings have to do with our impairment for aesthetics as well as bacteria. We are reaching toward greater public access of the river and the tributaries. And you may have seen the 2 new vessels that the Port Authority has put into service that are scooping up the debris in the ship channel. They're called Flotsam and Jetsam, and they're doing a wonderful job to make that part of our river prettier, happier, and healthier. So we are the organization that does the business. We get our charge from the International Joint Commission of the US and Canada, and then it trickles down. Everything slides downward, including water, and we are at the ground level doing the work under the charge of the US and Canadian governments through the US EPA, through Ohio EPA. Our coordinating committee consists of this list of people and organizations. You will notice that related to the county, in our coordinating committee, which is our steering committee, is included the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission, the Soil and Water Conservation District, the Board of Health, and Department of Public Works. Department of Public Works is currently working on one of our biggest restoration projects, and that is the Scranton Peninsula project, where the towpath will come next to brand new fish habitat. That will increase the fishery in Lake Erie, which is a multi-billion-dollar business. We have these projects going on. You will have heard of the green bulkheads. Our first stab was hanging baskets. Now we're working on biomimicry projects and trying to bring life back to that ship channel that is hard edged. It's basically a big steel bathtub that fish have to try and maneuver from the lake back up into the streams. We work with the Board of Health. They, in fact, are helping us distribute some of these materials that I'll show you what you got in your laps in a minute. And we work with their watershed coordinator on a lot of restoration projects. Our Cuyahoga Relief Project has already brought in about $100,000 in federal funds, federal and state funds, to the region to reforest riparian areas and replace some of the ash trees that all of our communities are losing left and right. We coordinate with the Soil and Water Conservation District on ordinance work as well. And we do our restoration with habitats. We're working on removing dams, mostly the Route 82 dam and the Gorge Dam or the Edison Dam down in the Cuyahoga Falls area. We work on green infrastructure. We work to restore wetlands, forest canopy, and streams. And we create groups like Big Creek, grew out of an effort from the Cuyahoga RAP and CRCPO. We nurtured them, and now they're on their own. We help with West Creek. We're building a new organization for Mill Creek, which covers a big swath of land from Beechwood all the way to the river. Watershed stewardship is an individual thing. It's also a community thing. So our priorities are, we have to remove these impairments, these list of problems. We have to restore the forest cover because that's where streams are healthiest and that's where aquatic life is healthiest. And it makes healthier people and healthier communities. This is all related to the economics. Money does grow on trees, believe it or not. And if you read the materials that I've given you, and I'll lead you through, I'll show you how. And then restoring that ship channel is possibly one of the hardest jobs that we'll do, but if we can do that, we are going to be the showcase, we already are, the showcase for many other rivers throughout the region, the country, and the world who have these same problems. Big ore boats. Thank God we still have business happening on our navigation channel in our river. Other cities aren't so fortunate. We have to figure out how to let fish live alongside ore freighters. So recently we've been working on the Scranton Peninsula project. We did a wetland inventory and prioritization. We got an award from Ohio Environmental Education Fund for a training program. We produced a watershed book, which you will get copies of soon. And we've been doing workshops in all the communities. So how are we doing? Pretty well. Fish species and fish numbers are up. The couple of the dams are down. Euclid Creek took dams down. West Creek is trying to get some dams down. That'll happen pretty soon. In the city of Brooklyn, we had a big tree planting last spring. This spring's tree planting, to which you are all invited, April 27th from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. in Richmond Heights, at Richmond Heights City Hall. That creek, we will be putting some restoration trees around. The sediment, quality of the sediment is improving. We may not have to capture it in confined disposal facilities for very much longer. And if you've been down to the river, what you used to call the flats, we call the navigation channel. We're going to be calling it the flats again because there's going to be activity down there again. Metro Parks has invested in property, the Rowing Foundation. The Port Authority will be restoring Irish Town Bend, the part that's slumping into our river. They're putting their money and their backs behind that project, and it's going to be huge. This is a picture of the two debris harvesters. They pick up things as small as a plastic bag or a plastic bottle and as large as a tree and remove them. We work with and support our stewardship groups. We had Great Lakes Week here last fall. We do merchandising. Have any of you seen this on the lower left-hand corner, this on t-shirts walking around the city? This was a big seller in our merchandising campaign. It was from the bad river to the good river. It's not a fabulous river yet, but it's good. And we get our funding from various sources. ArcelorMittal funds us, Goodyear funds us. They both have facilities on the river. Gun Foundation funds us, has funded us. U.S. Forest Service, Ohio EPA, U.S. EPA. And in the future, we are growing our board. We are expanding our plans. This is a 9 Mile Creek that used to be an old style retention basin. Now it's a wetland, and it's brought new business. This is in my town, in my ward, so I brag on this. So a company, a business stayed in town and built an extra facility just to be near this because this turned out to be so good. We hope to see you at Burning River Fest this year. We're there every year. We are doing River Day on May 18th, which happens all throughout the watershed. You're invited to join us for tree plantings. In September, we will be having our semi-annual State of the River Symposium, and we would love to have you come and take part in our events. You represent the land. We count on you, so we would love to have you involved. I know Nick has been involved beforehand. And if you'd like one of these magnets for your cart, just let me know. It's a friendly little fish that shows how healthy the Cuyahoga River is now. In your packet, one of the things I would like you to especially see, this last year we spent gathering every single ordinance that has anything to do with a tree from all of the communities in Cuyahoga County, Summit County, in the Rocky River watershed and the Cuyahoga River watershed, and they're on here because we are trying to get everybody to share consistent, standard, high-quality watershed protection ordinances, and trees are a good place to start. This particular piece of literature is especially for you and the elected officials and the planning commissions and the boards of zoning appeals and the housing departments and the building departments in your communities, because it talks about how money grows on trees, how trees benefit your bottom line, how cost avoidance comes along with seeing these trees as large, non-structural stormwater management facilities, and also how to raise extra money and how to grow your forest for watershed health. If you have any questions, we are at crcpo.org or Cuyahoga River RAP, R-A-P, Any questions? Thank you. Yeah. Sorry.
Good afternoon. I'm attending a community meeting tomorrow night in Middleburg Heights. It's putting together a program for Abrams Creek, and I'm wondering if you folks have anything to do with that.
We haven't directly had anything to do with Abrams Creek because it's in the Rocky River watershed. But by virtue of the fact that we supply materials and support to the Soil and Water District where the Rocky River watershed coordinator lives, we have helped out. They also have used our wetland studies and report and prioritization reports to feed into the work that gets done there. And I think we might be paying for some trees as part of that restoration. I don't have the list on the top of my head, but yeah, that's a great project. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Without getting into any long, not actually even looking for an answer, but I know that we've got, many places ordinances about riparian setbacks and all these plannings, and how important the canopy is to the future. But unfortunately, it looks like we're losing the war to deer. I mean, as fast as we're planning, it's in conflict, and it shouldn't be, because you should be kind of united. It's a big problem, and I wish I had some answers to tell people, because that's one of the biggest complaints I hear. And being, involved in this end of it seems like it's a conflict. So I hope
Yes.
we learn how to solve this problem in an urban environment, because we just can't forget about it. Our emerald necklace, if it dies, it's not going to have a regrowth. So it's a big problem.
Yep. Sometimes it feels like 2 steps forward, 1 step back. I'd like to introduce my staff. Kathy Len, on your right, is a program manager, and Mark Warman is our newest program manager. Kathy leads in fact, she just completed the position paper for help me with the name of the Lake Erie Allegheny Partnership. Yeah, so the committee on managing deer. So this organization that deals with biodiversity and ecosystem health is coming out with the position paper, and that should set the stage for more services. So you will hear from us, and we'll come and talk, and we'll work on something.
I want to give you a card, because I want to be on that mailing list.
Oh, yeah. You are.
I really want to see, because I don't have the answers, and so I'll give you my card.
Now, in South Euclid, we have found coyotes to be somewhat helpful. Well, inadvertently, I mean, we didn't bring them in, but they showed up because the food was there. Thank you.
The Northeast Ohio Sustainability Committee Consortium?
Good afternoon. How are you?
Good afternoon.
My name is Hunter Morrison. I'm the director of the Northeast Ohio Sustainable Communities Consortium. I'd like to also introduce Grace Gallucci, who is the chair of the organization this year, as well as being the executive director of NOACA, and Patty Chobe on our consulting team, who will also speak about our engagement. And I also want to thank you for the time that you've allowed Ed Jurst to work closely with us as a member of the board representing Cuyahora County on this important effort to look at a 12-county region and sort of try to peer into the future. I also want to express my appreciation to Councilman Germana for his lobbying to have us present to you. I know that you've had many, many things on your agenda, and we did a briefing, I think, Chuck, back in November. So I very much appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today. The consortium came together as a grant-seeking organization and collaboration in 2010. Some 23 organizations from Northeast Ohio, which include the 4 metropolitan planning organizations and the NEFCO Council of Governments. Cuyahora County was a strong participant in this to go after a unique grant for sustainable communities, which in itself is a coalition between the Department of Housing and Urban Development, the Department of Transportation, and the U.S. EPA. We wound up receiving a 3-year grant for $4.25 million, matched with funding also from the Fund for the Future of about $500,000, and by in-kind contributions of approximately $2 million at the time, which has actually grown. This was an unprecedented opportunity to do a 3-year program to look at the future of our region. We grew our organization to deal with issues of scale and diversity, and to bring in organizations like GCRTA to represent the transit agencies and our metro parks, to coalesce the metro parks of Northeast Ohio, and also the Summit County Health Board, which I know is a member of the group that you just previously heard from. We're looking to 2040. The reason to look for 2040 is that's the timeline and time horizon that our 4 metropolitan planning organizations are doing major capital planning. It's also a period that's far enough out, it's essentially a generation ahead, far enough out to engage a wide range of people in speculating about our future. This is a very large area. This is 12 counties. It is the size geographically and also in terms of population as the state of Connecticut. It's organized, as you know, into 12 counties, 4 metropolitan planning organizations, and 2 councils of government. And in terms of how we have approached this, is to really work within the framework of the 5 counties of NOACA, the 4 counties of the NEFCO Council of Governments, which included 2 MPOs, SCATs and AMATs, and then the 3 counties of the Eastgate Council of Governments. So we're working closely with these bodies to ensure that it reflects, the resulting work reflects the interests and concerns of a very diverse area. Our membership includes counties, our legacy industrial cities, our metropolitan planning organizations and councils of government, also the metropolitan housing authorities, 3 of whom agreed to be members and contribute to the in-kind. 2 of our universities, Cleveland State and Youngstown State, plus Lorain County Community College, authorities, and a number of non-governmental organizations, which round out the perspectives that come to our board. We have put together a consulting team to assist us on our work, and I won't get into broad detail, but it's a mixture of very capable national firms led by Sasaki Associates, who's done a considerable amount of work in the Cleveland area and in the Akron area over the years, plus our strategy and community solutions and career and Cobalt Group and City Architecture, all as contractors or subcontractors, bringing a broad perspective from Northeast Ohio. As we boil down the challenge ahead, and really been meeting over the last year and a half across the region, there are 3 words that really come to mind when we're talking about the goals of a vibrant NEO. One is that it be a vibrant area, that it be energetic and dynamic and vivid and alive and attractive, that it also be sustainable, and that's a broad term, and for our purposes we define it as maintainable and supportable, self-sufficient, rational, reliable. But the third point, which really resonates through most of the communities of Northeast Ohio, is resilient. because we've been through tough times across Northeast Ohio, and we are a tough place. We're a hardy place. We need to build on those strengths that have allowed all of us to face some difficult times, whether it's Youngstown after Black Monday, or Cleveland after default, or facing the unprecedented economic challenges we all do today. As we've gone across Northeast Ohio to try to look at very broadly at the challenges ahead of us, there are 5 realities that have come from all the data we've looked at. First, taxpayers are generally speaking, are burdened by the costly fragmentation across the local and regional governmental footprint. We have a lot of governments. We have a certain amount of redundancy, a certain amount of overlap, and the fragmentation makes it difficult for us to collaborate. This is one of the efforts we're doing here, is to actually walk the walk of collaboration. Our cultural and natural resources are under stress, and whether you're talking about the cleanup of the lake and our rivers, or whether we're talking about the maintenance of some of our cultural institutions, our symphonies, our schools, our churches, we see across the region resources under stress. Rising infrastructure costs exceed our means to pay. Simply put, our region has grown its footprint by over 20% since 1970 and lost population. We have not grown the population of the 12 counties of Northeast Ohio. In fact, we're about 300,000 less than we were in 1970. So simply put, we have to do more with less because we have made more stuff and built more communities and have fewer people overall to maintain that. And that gets to the next point, which our land use patterns do affect the way our local and regional budgets play out. And I think we all agree that the local economy needs to be stronger. Scenario planning is a tool that we have decided to use to look into the future. It's a tool that was developed mainly in areas experiencing great growth, Envision Utah, Portland, Oregon, places like that, where the whole idea of Portland having to absorb another 1 million people, of Salt Lake City having to absorb large numbers of people, how do we address these challenges? Well, we're a different type of region, but we feel that this methodology helps the public and decision makers understand the long-term consequences of the decisions you're making today. It's a process that helps us go from learning to acting. It's not a plan, it's a learning tool, it's a way of testing different options and building our capacity as a region and as the communities within our region to make better decisions. We start with something called the business as usual scenario, basically looking back between 1990 and 2010 at the trends on households and population and employment and building permits and abandonment to see where we are now and to project out from that where we're headed. We're assuming in this business as usual scenario that the current trends of growth and decline continue. That's a bold assumption, but it's a good way to look at it from a baseline. That the same housing mix that we've had over the last 20 years continues into the future, the same employment mix, and that the same zoning and development patterns continue. This is what happens when you keep doing into the future what you've been doing in the past. The modeling produces a set of land use maps. This happens to be from Des Moines, a city that's going through, it's also a grant recipient that is going through a similar process, where they looked at where they were in 2011 and where they would be in 2050, experiencing considerable growth, using the same assumptions that what happened in the past will continue into the future. We also look at various thematic maps. This happens to be one dealing with stream water levels because the development patterns in the Des Moines area are creating issues of flooding. There are other issues that we have in Northeast Ohio that we'll be looking at as well. The outputs of this process are really a set of options that come forward with what happens if things continue the way they are, unmitigated and unadjusted into the future. There are several other options that Des Moines looked at, having to do with changing zoning, changing some of the development patterns, and relying more heavily on transit, and also in the lower right corner, really trying to deal with riparian setbacks and other ways to provide more capacity naturally to handle the floodwater, but also to take advantage of the waterfronts around which that community was formed. Now we start with really where we are today. This is the 12 counties, and this shows a sort of a very broad map of where we have constrained land, i.e. developed land, and where we have developable land. The red is constrained or already developed. The green is suitable for development or available for development, broadly speaking. About 50%, a little less than 50% of these 12 counties are classified for tax purposes as agricultural. They're not farmed, but they're classified as unurbanized. Big point, across the region we still have a lot of land, and we have a freeway network that allows much of that land to be accessible for development into the future. This is another a map that we've looked at, and that we were as an example. This happens to be the region zoning. One of the things we did with the 4 metropolitan planning organizations and their GIS systems and Cuyahoga County, and thanks again to Dan Meany and his folks, to work together to develop the first ever region-wide land use map and zoning map. So this is the generalized zoning across Northeast Ohio. The key point there, it's a fairly fragmented process, and there's a lot of land that's suitable and zoned for development. This is a first draft of the business as usual scenario, and I don't want to get into details because we're still working on this, but these are the types of maps we're going to be looking at. The other thing we're going to be looking at is getting a handle on what the fiscal impacts are. What are the costs? We have, I think, an opportunity to look very broadly at a 12-county region, certainly at the individual 12 counties, and we're drilling down into individual municipalities and taxing units to look at what are the costs and benefits of the existing patterns, and then we will be testing the alternatives against that as well. Not to get again into great detail, but it's an analysis of the revenues and costs entailed at the taxing level for the different services, the levels of service applied to the scenarios, to give us an apples and apples opportunity to look at what it looks like on the ground and what it costs. This process is a 3-stage process that we are undertaking. We have been working on the business as usual scenario and have a workshop series coming up in the end of this month, April 30th, May 1st and 2nd. That will then lead to work on over the summer on alternative scenarios, and coming back in the early fall with other workshops dealing with what appears to be the emerging preferred scenario. The goal is to get the big issues on the table and to prioritize them, to experiment with a range of strategies, and to allow and enable communities to align their actions with a broader vision, and to instruct and inform agencies such as our metropolitan planning organizations that spend money on our behalf, where they're going and how that is adding and moving us towards a broad vision. The process starts with the assessment and involvement in our common values. This happens to be a list of values that's come out of other planning efforts, but we are meeting in our first round really to talk not just about the maps and not just about the trend lines, but really more importantly about what our values are across the communities of Northeast Ohio. There will be 6 meetings covering the 12 counties. There'll be 3 dealing with Cuyahoga County because it's a large area. One in downtown or in the city of Cleveland. One in Oberlin dealing with Lorain and Medina counties, and western Cuyahoga. One in Cuyahoga dealing with eastern Cuyahoga over at Community College, eastern Cuyahoga, and Lake and Geauga. And Patty Chobe will talk a little bit more about that. But those meetings are really to open up the discussion on common values. The basic approach that we're taking through all of this is that it's an iterative process of learning and sharing and creating and then acting. And I'd like to turn it over to Patty to talk about the upcoming meetings and make the ask. And the ask is that you come and you encourage your constituents to come so that we can have a robust discussion across Northeast Ohio that brings your concerns and insights into the mix.
Thank you, Hunter. I want to first thank your clerk, who was very diligent in responding to our request to meet with you. So thank you for allowing us to be here today, and to Councilman Jumana for helping lead that charge. And I believe Councilman Rogers was at one of our Young Leader events that we held last fall over at Jumpstart. Over the last 8 months, we have been trying to figure out the best way to engage a region the size of Northeast Ohio. And as Hunter mentioned, this rubric of learning, sharing, creating, and acting has been sort of an iterative process that we've gone through. And where we are today is we're really at the beginning of the create stage, which is to use the time together in 2013 to basically not reinvent what's happening in the region, but to bring things like what Jane Goodman was talking about and what our colleague Steve Deaver will talk to you about in a minute, existing initiatives that are already underway that talk about the strengths and the assets of the region, and to make sure that we are aligning with those different initiatives across the 12 counties. So whether we're talking about watershed planning and restoration or remediation, housing issues across the region, or transportation issues, we want to make sure that we have a diverse and broad cross-section, which is why we're out talking with elected officials like yourself, because we know you're connected to lots of people. As Hunter described, the first wave of scenario planning workshops are going to be at the end of this month. The three that are impacting Cuyahoga and the constituents that you serve are going to be on April 30th, May 1st and 2nd. So they can go to Oberlin on April 30th. They can go to Slavic Village at 3rd Federal on May 1st, or out to Corporate College East over in Warrensville Heights. And I'll have more information about that in a minute. As Hunter referenced earlier, this is a really big region, it's really diverse, and there's a lot of people in it who are doing a lot of great things. And so in order to get our hands around how do we best convene people, we started with this existing framework of the MPO and the COG organizations. And it's this terminology that you'll start hearing more and more of, which is this 3-4-5, where we're looking at the eastern part of the region and the Mahoning, Trumbull, and Ashtabula region that is often coordinated through the Eastgate Council of Government. We are looking at working with NOACA, and the director, Grace Gallucci, is here, and the 5 counties that organization serves. And then in Summit and Portage, we have an organization called AMETS, which is a transportation study organization that has done a ton of things in the area of bike and pedestrian improvements to the region. And then down in Stark and Wayne County, actually in Stark there's a transportation group, and in Wayne, Summit and Portage and Stark get together, and they're part of a 4-county regional planning organization. So basically, we're taking existing infrastructure that exists and the work that those organizations have been doing so that we can begin to get into other networks around the region, which is why we've structured the engagement in these, what we're calling the 6 engagement zones. And you'll look and see that Cuyahoga is 4, and obviously because of the population that we have and the diversity that we have in the county, we will be moving those meetings around, but I gave you the 3 previous locations, so we think that they're pretty equally spaced out and attractive to people, whether they live or work in those particular locales. One of the things that you'll hear as we're going through this process is that our commuter patterns have changed, where people live and work have changed, where people go to school and live have changed, and so it's not uncommon for people to get in their car and drive from Trumbull County into Cleveland. I was in Youngstown last night with an awesome group of residents from the Mahoning River organization, and heard all about the folks in Western Pennsylvania who are coming into Ohio for employment. So a lot of diversity in where people live and work, and so we're saying to people, pick a location that you can identify with and attend that workshop. And as we go through the next phases of workshops, those meetings will move around so that we're being equitable as we go through the region. This is really where we're at today. We're a week away from April 15th. And we are wrapping up materials, analysis, data synthesis that will be used to present the same presentation in each of these 6 workshops and the same type of engagement activities across the region. And what we are building up to is trying to get as many people, upwards of 200 folks, to attend these workshops so that we can have a broad cross-section of the region participating. Registration is open. We've got a website that is really easy to use, and what we would like to hear from you, particularly or perhaps through your clerk, if you would like postcards, materials, electronic forms of communication that you can send out to your constituents. We also, as time is available, will make ourselves available to meet with folks like Councilman Miller was talking about, those constituents of yours who are engaged as civic leaders in planning initiatives, if there's a special group within your council district that you think it would be helpful for us to meet one-on-one with and explain what we're doing, we'd be happy to do that between now and April 30th. And the whole strategy for what we're doing is really about connecting to the networks of people who are doing things that need to be connected to help create this regional vision. It's a simple networks approach. It's proving to be very successful, and we really look forward to connecting to the people in your network, given the way in which your council communities come together, and we hope that you can be supportive and participate in this process.
Thank you very much. Questions, comments? Mr. Brady?
Yes. Just a request, and that's that although I know we're trying to be as paperless as possible, as you can imagine, I'm not going to be able to retain a lot of this if I want to refer back to it. And so if I could get something by email or
Sure.
hard copy, so that when I inevitably encounter people, I'll be able to refer to it.
Great, we'll do that.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering what happens at the end of all this. Will you guys be presenting model legislation or going around to the different municipalities and making suggestions on zoning reforms and things of that nature?
Hunter, why don't you answer that, and then I want to give a specific example that came up in Mahoning County last night.
Well, what we didn't get into in the interest of time is the other half of the story. The other half of the story is products. Our board is very concerned with just the point you've made. It's fine to have a plan. The recommendations, this is not, again, it's not really a plan, it's a framework. This will be adopted by our board, and we are assuming and hope that the MPO boards and the other bodies that need to take action at that level will do so. But the second part of our work as the project management office is in products. One of the products is a dashboard of key indicators, and we're working with all the different groups we know of, both locally and nationally, that are doing indicators, so that we can keep an eye on what matters, and that we believe that should be an ongoing operation. The second piece is a toolkit of practical recommendations. One of the things we're finding is that there's not a lot, in many ways, that has to be invented, because if you want to know about urban agricultural zoning, Cleveland's just done a great code, and so is Youngstown. So if you're in Warren or in your Ashtabula or in your Elyria, learn from that. We're finding all sorts of tools in the tool shed locally that one part of the region doesn't know about. We also know from national networks about tools that work in specific types of places. We need to make that available to communities. One of the other things we're discovering, not surprisingly, is as budgets have been cut at the local level, staff capacity has been reduced. So if we can provide value to the discussion by providing a regional land use map, providing recommendations on zoning tools, that's something we ought to be doing. The third is on policies. And again, there are policies that have been bubbling up in our discussions that have to do with how the region functions and how we can do better. I think that one of the best examples that I think several of the members are probably very familiar with is the whole land bank legislation, which started out in Michigan and came as a sample in Cuyahoga County, and then the folks in Mahoning County said, how about making it statewide? That's a policy that is dealing with a problem of regional significance, which is abandonment of our legacy industrial cities. Well, there are issues on the transportation side, on how we fund public transit. There are issues having to do with zoning. Township zoning is one of the issues that's come up in Medina County. There are areas that we look at and say, well, maybe these are things that are of regional consequence, and we can magnify our voices and let them be heard. And the fourth thing is pilots, to test out ways in which we can make quality connected places. And that's, again, a broad term. One of our work streams deals with that, but the idea of how does all this stuff work in your community, in your neighborhood, in your town, in your village, in your township, and how do you create a better place, and how do you connect that place to the rest of the region? Because increasingly we are a much more connected place. So those are the four work stream or task or product work groups that we have going now, go along with the planning framework.
And Just to give a real concrete example, and I want to apologize for not acknowledging Councilman Jones, because I think you were also at one of our Young Leader events. Last night I was with the Friends of the Mahoning River, this energetic group of 50 people who've been working for the last several years on trying to figure out how to improve not only stream health in the river, but access to it, and particularly around recreational access. As the canoers and the kayakers and the hikers and the recycling people got together, they realized that there were a host of issues, not just the health of the river itself and the riparian zones around it, but that there were opportunities to reclaim metals discarded from years of industrial use, that there was a need to remove dams that were often used to pull water to cool the steel mills and are now actually really major safety hazards because of the kinds of hydraulics they set up. They also wanted to make sure that the fishermen didn't lose, their bankside and creekside locations. And so they created this collaborative effort that has not only gotten a group of citizens, they don't even have a 501c3 organization. They basically volunteer to figure out how to get all these projects done. They write grants, they have cleanup days, they have a day that celebrates the river and the activities. And they are just about to get ready to go to the next level, which is, do we need another organization? Do we do a comprehensive plan? What do we do? And just out of complete coincidence, one of the leaders in that group, who's very interested in doing a land use plan for the land next to the river, down the whole corridor, ran into somebody from one of the neighborhood development groups. And he said, hey, yeah, we're thinking about doing some development plans as well. And they basically, in a 10-minute conversation, decided to partner and get together. And after our presentation and discussion last night, they were like, well, hey, could we use the land use map that was created as a part of the toolkit from this process that we're engaged in, that has, 1.8 million parcels in it. It actually represents the land use in all 12 counties. And can we take what the 5 mayors in the cities who are along the corridor have been doing to identify brownfield redevelopment, begin to overlay them, and actually begin to articulate our vision? And I said, you need to come to a workshop. And he goes, you mean we can come and bring our ideas for how these kinds of initiatives can fit together? And I said, the simple answer is yes. And that's really what this process is about. It's about taking those passions, those interests, that really intangible commitment that we have from citizens in our community, and bringing it together in a structured way so that those vision ideas and passions can be heard and articulated in a way that puts them on paper and ultimately takes them to the next level.
Thank you. Mr. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw.
Mr. Hunter, in regards to your 345
Yes.
that showed in your opening slide, which was too many governments, at least, or alluded to, and your 345 was alluding to 2040, I think, at least in some concept. Is it your vision that we would end up with 3 and a 4 and a 5 as a consolidated, so we'd end up with 3 counties out of those 12, or whatever name we want to now identify it as? And I'm not saying it's a bad thing or a good thing. I'm just identifying as to what the vision is ultimately sketched out to be.
Well, the 345 refers really to the existing organizational framework of Northeast Ohio. As Patty pointed out, we're operating on a network of networks. To do a project for a region this size in a short period of time, we need to work with and through the existing entities. I would rather doubt that there's countywide consolidation in anybody's imagination. But what I think we're seeing is that by collaborating, there's a much heightened learning curve. There's a much greater opportunity to share. The best example, to be perfectly frank, is how we were able to take, there are 12 county auditors. Each one of them, as you know, takes all the parcels in their county every couple of years, 3 or 4 years, and does an assessment. Part of the assessment is to go and look at the land use. I think there's something like 120 categories they have to fill out, and there's a standardized process. Well, we were able to work with each of those 12 county entities through the metropolitan planning organizations, which had relationships with them, to get their information into the MPOs about the property that's there, knowing that it's going to be accurate, and at the end of the day, producing a tool which a community can use that's a generalized land use plan. Now, that was done in about 6 months for 1.8 million parcels, and that is being used as the platform for looking at the scenario planning going forward. I think we're going to see more of that collaborative work, but how, I think you're well familiar, the idea of even bringing 2 or 3 municipalities together to share a fire department or a police department is a challenge. We're looking at how to network the assets we have and leverage those for the future.
Right, yeah, I understand that, but your one point was that somebody drives from Trumbull County to Cuyahoga County and back in the same day. And of course, the 88 counties were designed and laid out because that's what it took a buckboard to go from the center back to the county and back home. And that's the only reason we have, I mean, the core reason we have 88 counties right now.
Yep.
And,
Well,
so-
I think again, I alluded to some of the transportation issues. One of the real challenges in Northeast Ohio is that our commuter sheds have merged. And I tell people when I was in the 5th grade, a trip from Cleveland to Akron was a field trip, a whole day field trip to see the rubber plants. Today it's a daily commute. But you have 2 transit agencies serving serving Summit and Cuyahoga County, and getting between the 2 of them is nigh on impossible. You have a weak transit system in Trumbull County, so that you have to drive from Trumbull. You have a weak transit system in Lorraine, which means that you can't get from Lorraine to the job base that's growing in western Cuyahoga and eastern Lorraine. That's a legacy of the way in which this state funds transit agencies. That may be an area where we look to see, can we remove some of the barriers to collaboration that stand in the way. We're doing it on watersheds. We may want to do it on commuter sheds as well. But these are the types of things we're identifying.
Mr. Miller?
Madam Chair, to Mr. Morrison, if we say that there might be some alternatives to the business as usual scenario, what would be the major variables that could be changed that would have enough impact to move the needle on what we're going to get in 2040?
I don't want to presume on what will come out of the meetings, but one of the things we can look at is where development and growth is taking place and how that occurs in new areas, newly developed areas, or in existing areas. I think that's one of the big challenges in Northeast Ohio is the fact that we have essentially surplus housing. I think there are going to be other options that come forward as people understand what the challenges are ahead. So I have a personal opinion and personal bias on all this, but one of the things we're trying to do very carefully is to listen to people. So I can't give you the answer to that. I think this will come out of the values discussion. But what people value and whether or not what we're doing comports with those values or not. And you're going to see different challenges in different parts of the region having to do with how we develop, the environmental consequences of that development one way or the other, the questions of access to jobs and the like, which will vary from place to place. But again, one of the things we're hoping for is we get a very robust engagement so that we can come back and say, here's what we're hearing, which also includes not only the meetings, but an online tool called Imagine My Neo. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, real briefly, because I want to be careful with our time. Following this first round of workshops, and actually in between each of them, there will be follow-up engagement tools that will allow people who don't go to the workshops to actually voice their opinion. So we'll try to mirror the kinds of conversations that will happen. But the first one that is currently being finalized is Imagine My Neo, which is going to be a 3-pronged tool for basically hearing from people about what's important to them around the issues that this particular process can actually have some impact on. And it's designed to allow people to reflect about what's important to them, but then to also give them some small, short pieces of information that help them understand if they took a purse of coins and started prioritizing based on money, what kind of impact would that have, and what are the kinds of policies and projects that would have to happen. So it's designed to make it more layperson in nature in terms of the terminology, but to really get at what's important so that as we move into the second phase of workshops, what's important becomes what is helping craft the conversation about those other alternatives that I think will ultimately get to what you're asking about, Councilman Miller.
Madam Chair. One more question, which is that Northeast Ohio is a very diverse place in terms of its people and their beliefs and their values and their aspirations and their priorities and so on. And my question is even supposing that you come up with some scenarios that are different enough from business as usual, that if we all as a region went in that direction, it would move the needle a fair amount. How do we get to any kind of consensus? I'm afraid that we're going to get a business as usual scenario. We're going to get some alternative scenarios that would probably result in some better outcomes if they were consistently and rigorously followed throughout the region. But we're all going in different directions. How do we do that?
You've asked about the magic of doing a plan. My own experience personally is that a consensus emerges from conversation, and that this framework process is essentially framing a conversation about the future. This is the first time since the late 70s that we've actually taken a look at the future. And I think we're going to find that there's people who have been working at this for years, and there's younger generation, some of them are here, some of them are not, who want to be part of crafting that future. But our obligation really is to encourage and create the opportunity for an informed discussion. And I will only hearken back to my own experience in Cleveland, as you recall, with Civic Vision, where we started out with 35 neighborhoods thinking they're never going to talk to each other. And after a lengthy process, which involved a lot of communication, we were able to come forward with a plan that could be adopted with I think, only 2 minor objections. Because we were able to reflect in this framework we called Civic Vision 2000, a set of values that differ from community to community and plans that differ from community to community. People could see themselves in it. That's the art. But it's going to require engagement to get to that point. I don't think any of the participants are the least bit interested in imposing anything on anybody, but they're looking at this as a way of spurring an informed conversation about how we become more vibrant, more resilient, and more sustainable. But again, as you may recall from those days with Civic Vision, it was a lot of different conversations over a period of time. And we kept coming at it until we got it right. So this is really our first effort to do this across a large region. And we need your help to make sure that we're on track, that the people who care, and Patty pointed up something, we get all sorts of serendipities. She went out to do an engagement meeting and winds up with a planning group. Well, our obligation is to take this planning group, connect them with other people who are doing the same thing, use some of these tools and say, come to our meetings, or we'll do a follow-on. Let's take this piece of the plan and stick it on the map and see what people think. We might actually get, a lot of people think this is a good idea. That's how it begins, that's how things take off. Is when people see themselves in the plan, they see their hopes and their aspirations and their concerns, they see how what we're doing preserves and protects the things that they care about or doesn't. And in a democracy, people are free to make a whole bunch of choices. I think what we're trying to do is provide a more informed way and a more visual way, frankly, of looking at what the consequences of those choices are before we wake up and say, why did we ever do that?
Great, thank you. Any other questions, comments, Mr. Germano?
Madam Chair, thank you. I know you've been around these 12 counties making presentations like you did today. I'm just wondering, there's this urban versus non-urban. What's the attitude? Are people excited about possibly having connectivity, or is there a certain amount of leave us alone? We're not Cuyahoga County.
It depends. It depends. I think you pointed out, Patty, that we've got 12 counties and they're all city-states. They all have an approach and a set of concerns. I know that there's, in terms of rural and urban, there's some communities and counties that understand the relationship and want to figure out ways to collaborate, and others that basically, at least at this point, would like to not be part of our discussion. But the reality is that when we talk about people's values, talk to people about their values, there's an awful lot more in common than folks understand or see. Yeah, what we're trying to do is really pull up those things that we share. Because the fact of the matter is, we are in one region, and people, once they start talking to each other, we find they come up with some better solutions. But we're trying very carefully to avoid, the urban-rural, taking sides, all of that stuff, and coming at this to be as open and ecumenical as we can to get these issues out. And to see, and we went through a lengthy process to come forward with something called the Trends and Conditions Platform, which is on our site, which identifies the issues and concerns we have in common. And our board, which reflects that broad spectrum of interests, geographically, in terms of demography, in terms of the urban-rural, agricultural, we labored long on those statements to look at how we understand what we share in common and how we voice it in such a way that it doesn't bias you one way or the other, but really reflects the issues we have together. So I would encourage you to go on the Vibrant Neo webpage and look at the condition and trends, because it takes you through the work of the 5 different work streams on the economy, on the environment, on transportation and other connections, on housing and communities, and on quality connected places. And also pay attention to the work that's come out of a related piece of work we're doing called the Regional Assessment of Impediments to Fair Housing Choice, which entitlement communities are required to do for their own communities. We're looking at it for the whole 12 counties and seeing some areas where, if you look at it from that lens, we've got some issues in common that we need to work together on.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
You very much. And last but not least, Mr. Deaver from the Lake Erie Energy Development Corporation.
Good afternoon, members of council. I'm Steve Dever. I'm the Cuyahoga County appointee to the Lake Erie Energy Development Corporation that was created in 2010 by Cuyahoga County, Ashtabula County, Lake County, Lorain County, the City of Cleveland, Nortec, and the Cleveland Foundation. I want to give you a little bit of an update as to the offshore wind energy project as where it stands. This was an effort that first started in 2006 by the creation of the Energy Task Force, and through the process did a feasibility study, did a number of public engagement process, and then we've arrived at creating LEADCO in 2010. We have Dave Karpinski, who's the Vice President of LEADCO, who will lead you through this basic summary of where the project stands, this demonstration project stands at this point in time. We were successful just recently this year in receiving a significant grant from the Department of Energy, and we're in a competition along with 7 other projects throughout the country for further funding with the intention of the federal government of funding up to 3 projects with significant dollars. So this is basically just to give you a presentation, an overview of where the project stands, and of course to answer any questions that you may have. So, Dave.
Steve, thank you very much. And again, as Steve mentioned, my name is Dave Karpinski. I'm currently serving as the Vice President of Operations for LEADCO. Work with Lori Wagner, who's our president. Really pleased to be here. Thank you for the opportunity. I think we're excited to be able to share with you where we've been, but also kind of where we're at now and where we're heading to. One thing, this is an awful lot about the project that we're developing. One of the things I want to leave you with is our vision is not to just do a project, it's to create a new industry in the region to really drive the economic prosperity of our region. So we're focused like a laser on the project because we know that if you don't get past step 1, you don't get to step 2. But we do have this long-term vision of where we're heading. As Steve mentioned, Let me just kind of reiterate who LEEDCO is. Again, we were formed really to help develop the lakefront resources in unity. So you can imagine if we're trying to develop this resource and each county had to deal with this on their own, each county had to have their own resources to understand how to develop the offshore wind resource, you get kind of out of control. We didn't want to have developers pitting one county against the other. So all the counties join forces, we create a LEEDCO, and we're kind of off and running. So let's talk about the project. So we do have to have a project. There are no offshore wind turbines in the U.S. anywhere. There are thousands in Europe, but none in the U.S. So this is will be one of the first ones. We're looking, as the slide indicates, we're about 3 miles. If you go 3.5 miles out from Cleveland, you hit the crib. We're about 4 miles past that is the closest turbine. And then future development would be planned beyond that, because the wind actually is a little stronger beyond that. We'll be tying into the Cleveland Public Power substation there, the lake substation. And we're looking at 5 to 9 3-megawatt turbines, so anywhere from 15 to 27 megawatts. One of our activities is to find the optimal project size. That's some of the work we're taking on now. About 85 meters high will be the center of the turbine, as you can see there, and really we're looking at operation in 2017. We'll talk about kind of where we're at. This next slide really covers a lot of ground. So Steve mentioned, he did a good job of really highlighting from 2005 to 2012 what's been happening. We've been really developing public support, assessing the feasibility of this concept. So a lot of work's been done. Investment from Cuyahoga County, one of the key investors in that process over the years, the Cleveland Foundation, Nortec, Freshwater Wind, our developer, and many others. And really, there was a change in 2012. The Department of Energy also shares this vision of creating an offshore wind energy industry. And they recognize that until we actually have a few wind farms, the industry isn't going to go anywhere. So they structured a program to try to get 3 projects operational in the water. And that would be kind of the first step in creating this industry. So they issued a solicitation last spring that LEEDCO responded to. We built a team that I'll show you who's on that team a little while later. But we went from, in 2012, we applied. At the end of 2012, we learned that we were one of 7 winners out of over 60 applications. So already we're in a group that I think is pretty elite that made that cut. And in there, what DOE wants to do is very difficult to pick which 3 of those 7 are really the best position to create a project and to meet their objectives. So they said, we're going to fund 7 of you for this first phase, give you some funds to do the engineering, do the permitting applications, work on getting your power sold, and do all those kind of pre-development activities. And then we're going to have another competition at the end of that year, and we're going to pick 3 of those 7 to fund and go forward. And so we won. We're one of those winners now. We're in the early stages of executing that project now. So we're doing those activities of, again, the permitting, applying for all of our permits, a lot of engineering, doing the concept designs on the foundation on which the turbines will set, doing a comprehensive assessment of how you install it from A to Z, and that will kind of lead into what companies in the region can participate, what the cost rate will look like, how we're going to maintain and deploy this project. So then next year, February 15th, we owe DOE our set of deliverables. They're going to take some time and they're going to assess which of those 3 go forward. The impact to the winner is another $46.7 million of federal funding. So that's kind of the prize here to help make this project possible in 3 areas. So we obviously want to be one of those 3. So we have to beat 4 other projects. We're laser focused on beating 4 other projects to get to step 2. Step 2 brings, again, $46.7 million of federal investment to build the project, and these numbers are sized at the maximum of that 9 turbines that I mentioned. To build the project would require another $95 million of private investment. It would come primarily from some equity investors and a lot of debt to finance the project that would be funded off the power sales. So, if you look at kind of where that leads us, obviously significant funds spent so far, but really we're looking for the uptick to really get this project built. So we're excited about the funds we have, but really we're really kind of focused on winning the down select. So when we think about what this means, obviously bringing in $46.7 million to the region will help create jobs, create this new industry, position Northeast Ohio, the Cleveland area, and this region is one of the leaders in the country. Will be one of 3 projects, and we hope then that's the that's the jumping off point to create this industry here and position us to do a lot more work down the road. Again, that leverages some private investment. When we look at the economic assessment that we've done about 2 years ago, it generates a gross regional product for this area about $80 million. And this one project itself would create about 478 jobs, and I'll talk about that with the future, and 47 permanent jobs for operations and maintenance. We talk about jobs with the future because these are jobs that are in high demand around the world where there's a lot of offshore wind development. So, this is all about get a project built, understand the cost profiles, implement innovations to bring the cost down. We know that the cost is high when you start, and we want to invest in that and bring that cost down so it's parity. So we develop an energy resource that's in Northeast Ohio off the coast of Cleveland and Lake County, Ashtabula County, Lorain County, and is providing energy for our region and providing jobs for our region as well. And that's really what we're all about is the pilot project is that necessary step. We have to learn a lot. We have to really understand how you do this, how you build it, what the economics are, and how we can bring the cost down. But we're really all about building that industry out over the next 20, 30 years. This won't go through a lot of this, but what I want to just convey here is there are a lot of different disciplines necessary to do this. This isn't simply construction work. It's not simply kind of machining and fabricating work. There's a whole host of manufacturing, construction, professional services disciplines that are involved here that really get pretty exciting when you talk about the opportunities that this kind of industry can create from maybe lower skilled on the one end to highly technical resources on the other end. So that's really what the prize is for us, is what this can develop and also then be that source of energy in our region. So I want to talk about the team we formed. So I'm standing here today as one person. Steve's on our board. Jeff Applebaum is with us today. We've engaged PMC as our project management consultant, recognizing this is a complex project, and we need someone like Jeff on board to really help us with managing the day-to-day activities, but also the other aspects that come into the project. And one of those is really we talk about when we get into the serious construction and build phases, the whole procurement process. LEEDCO isn't well versed on that. We really will look to Jeff to help us with ensuring that we're soliciting as much MBE participation as we can, and female-owned businesses, and really being true to the transparent procurement processes. So Jeff obviously knows that space very well, so we're pleased to have Jeff. We have a developer called Freshwater Wind that we've been engaged with for a couple of years. Another local firm, McMahon DeGillis, has been doing the regulatory work for us, so they're really tasked with filing all the permits at the state and federal level and doing that work. URS, again, a major, a global engineering company with significant presence here in Cleveland. They're doing the technical work to support the permitting, so the studies and the technical analysis and engineering work that McMahon DeGillis needs. Obviously, the state of Ohio is a key player. They have to issue the permits and the submerged land lease for us to proceed. And I mentioned, that this project requires innovation to help drive down the costs. Case Western Reserve is our partner leading up some of those research efforts, so they'll be on there. The idea here is I show the Ohio partners on one page and then the national and international partners. Our strategy was, if you're trying to do something that hasn't been done here before, you could form a competent team and try to do it yourself without any experience. Conversely, you could go and say, well, somebody's done it in Europe, let's bring them all over here and do it here. Well, we didn't like either one of those, because we said what we're really trying to do is get the best of what we have in this region, and we have people that know how to build things in the lake. We have people that know the construction industry here. We have people that know how to get projects done in Cleveland, Cuyahoga County, in the region. We have people that know how to work in Ohio. People from Europe don't know that, right? But they know how to get the turbines. They know how technically to get this done. So how can we bring those two together, and in so doing, kind of do some tech transfer and knowledge transfer from the international to our local partners, and we think that's how we grow the industry. And now, when we're done, the people on this list will be in a group of companies and organizations that have done this before, and not many people can say that in the U.S. So moving on then to our more national international group, again, Department of Energy is the first one. Our lead investor and oversight, NREL, National Renewable Energy Laboratory, is a partner. This next one is an important one, the foundation experts. So Ocean Coastal Consultants, they're a company that has their headquarters, the parent company, in Denmark. They've done a significant amount of offshore wind development in Europe. So they really bring that expertise in dealing with foundations for wind turbines in the water. And they're doing our foundation design. Aranti Engineering is a small firm in Finland. really an expert over the past 35 years in icing structures and building structures in ice. So obviously that's one thing we have to deal with that you don't have to deal with off the coast of Virginia Beach. We have to deal with that, and we have an expert on board for that. ODE is a company out of the UK. The UK probably has the most offshore wind installed at this point, and ODE has been involved in actually constructing those wind farms in the UK. So there's a company that knows how to get it done off the coast of the UK. And rounding it out, Siemens is our turbine of choice at this point. They're the leader in offshore wind around the world, kind of hands down, bar none. So they are our partner there with a great offering. DNV KEMA is a certification body in electrical engineering, so they're going to be involved even more so in later phases where we have to certify the project to secure financing. And then Bayer Material Science is partnered with CASE on really innovative materials that can help us do several things with the icing and de-icing. So at that point, I really wanted to break here and entertain some questions and hopefully to share with you, where we're trying to go and why we're doing this and what we hope to gain when we're done. So I'll stop there and open up for questions.
Just out of curiosity, how far out do we own?
So the way the submerged land lease works is 3 miles out, you don't really own it. It's the state of Ohio keeps it in trust. The county
So within the 3 miles, does the county own it or the state?
The county has rights to control it, but they don't really own it necessarily.
Okay.
So after 3 miles, the state actually issues the permit. The county has a key role. When it comes time for the permits, the state's going to come to the county and saying, LeadCo wants this permit. Do you object to this? Do you have another use for this land, this submerged land, or should we go ahead and give it to LeadCo?
So how far does the state own? It's like halfway?
All the way to Canada. So these are all state
We own
waters.
all the way to Canada?
All the way to the border. So there are
Oh,
no
okay,
federal,
all right, okay,
I'm
okay,
sorry,
got it, okay.
to the Canadian border, yeah.
And what about the ecology? I mean, what is this going to do to like the fish and wildlife and all that
So
stuff?
part of our task, and I mentioned URS is one of our entities. There's been a lot of work. There are a variety of studies that have to be done to ensure that you're citing this in an area that won't unduly affect avian, bird wildlife. Fishery studies are also necessary so that you don't cite this in an area where could disrupt the fishery. So there are a lot of efforts that are underway now, and we've done some work already that address all those ecological
And what about
concerns.
the birds going into the blades?
Well, if you cite the turbines in areas that are outside of the known migration paths, that's the way that turbine farms are sited on land and offshore in Europe as well. The other thing, conversely, is what the experience from Europe has been, that when you put these structures in the water, these are really, think of them as artificial reefs. So it actually stimulates the emergence of a kind of ecosystem in the water where there are some pretty kind of barren, dead areas in Lake Erie now. So you could have kind of an improvement effect on the ecology in the lake.
Because our water freezes as opposed to in Europe, in the salt water. So.
Right. We have different icing conditions. So it turns out that it's very similar to Finland. Finland's not considered freshwater, but when you get up as far north as where Finland is situated in the North Sea, the salinity of that water is not much different than we have in Lake Erie. So we can learn a lot from the experience they've had for many years in putting structures in the ice water. Finland also has a turbine. They're on a similar path as we are, so they're actually a little bit ahead. They have one turbine in the ice water, so we can learn a lot from them. And this gentleman, this firm that we have engaged, Arante Engineering, worked on that turbine project as well. So he's a great asset that we have on our team.
I think, Mr. Brady?
I just want to know whose district this is in.
Maybe there's a new seat here for somebody. I don't know.
Good question.
No, I was been watching this over the years and reading about it, and it's interesting. Lake Erie, of course, is like very shallow compared to the other Great Lakes, and I would assume that would be an asset in terms of building turbines. It's also known as being more turbulent, as far as I've heard, because it's shallow.
Right.
So which is it? It's both, and does it
both.
help or does it hurt?
So the depth, the shallow depth helps, and the other thing that helps is the uniformity of the depth. Because the way we look at that is because it's so uniform, we can design one foundation that's going to accommodate the various depths that we do have that aren't that extreme. So that all of a sudden increases our economies of scale. When you go to where you have a variety of depths, you have to engineer different foundations then for those different depths. In terms of the wave activity, Yes, it's more than in the other Great Lakes, but it's a lot less than what you see in the North Sea. So it's well known how to manage and how to deal with those mid-ocean conditions if we look at the experience from Europe. So that's kind of, you know, how we look at that. But that shallow depth does help. Now, there's some shallow depths off the East Coast, not everywhere, but if you go down in the kind of mid-South Atlantic, they have some shallow waters as well, and that is an advantage. But theirs kind of aren't shallow as uniformly throughout their fields.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Miller?
Who are the 6 competitors and where are they in the process compared to us?
So if I run down, we'll start maybe up in the northeast coast. So we have 2 projects in Maine. The University of Maine has a consortium. They're the only other non-private sector applicant or award winner like LEEDCO. Statoil has another one in Maine, so 2 off the coast of Maine. Then we go down to Atlantic City in New Jersey. There's a group called Fisherman's Energy that has a project site off the coast of New Jersey. Then you go down to Virginia. Dominion Energy, the utility in that area, is actually the lead applicant for that project. So a very formidable competitor. And then you come around in the Gulf. Texas has a Gulf Coast project that was one of the winners. And you go back, you kind of round that up to the West Coast, up in Oregon. There's another project that's one of the winners off the coast of Oregon. And then there's our projects that rounds up to 7. You know, when we look at this, each of them have different strengths and weaknesses like LEEDCO. So we're not Statoil, we're not Dominion Energy, but we look at it and think about the agility that LEEDCO has versus a large entity like that. What I would say is you know, a couple of things. Some of the projects, Fisherman's and Dominion, will have an easier path to getting the power sold. There's some state policies in place in New Jersey that are working that way. Dominion being a regulated utility will have an easier path to kind of getting the power sold. But you know, we have a long history of the public support for this project that everybody recognizes as extremely valuable. And if you look at what happened in Cape Wind, if you follow this at all, Cape Wind's been hung up in a kind of controversy for about 10 years trying to make that happen because of the kind of the lack of public support. We also think we have a great team. We have a large team, as you can see, but we think we've done a great job of bringing the kind of European expertise with the local talent, where not all teams have done that. Some teams have, in New Jersey, for example, there's no one that's ever done an offshore wind project. They're using Chinese turbines, never been in water, with contractors and consultants and engineering firms that have never actually done one. So each of these has a different things. It's a bit hard to handicap it. Everyone you talk to has a different way to look at it. You know, we think we are extremely competitive in the mix. We think being the only one in the Great Lakes is an advantage. We think the DOE and the federal government is really interested in the Great Lakes. But if you talk to others around the country, they'll handicap it a little differently. But hopefully that helped answer the question.
And Madam Chair, what's the decision time expected on the narrowing to 3?
The decision will be announced before next May 14th, May 14th of 2014. So we have to have our work done February 14th, and they're going to take up to 3 months to decide.
And if we're not successful, do we have any other ways to get this project done?
You know, if we're obviously focused on being successful at this point and doing what we have to do. So I think if we're not successful, we have to regroup and say, what does this mean? What's changed in the past year? What other opportunities are there? But we don't have a plan B, C, and D at this point, Councilman.
Okay, well, good luck.
Great, thank you.
And I don't know if you said it or maybe we just missed it. Mr. Germanis, he didn't hear it either, so I won't feel stupid. Who makes the final decision?
The Department of Energy.
Okay.
So U.S. Department of Energy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you know, we have a track record here. Remember Governor Rhodes was going to build that bridge to Canada years ago?
Yeah, I kind of remember that. It's been a little while ago.
We have a track record here. Okay. Yes.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. The 2020 environmental requirements, what's the status of that, and what impact, if any, does it have if the 2020, which I believe is being considered to be reduced or eliminated out there?
Oh, the SB 220 in Ohio, you're talking about the renewable portfolio standard in Ohio, okay.
Any impact at all on this project?
In this project, it definitely has an impact on the industry. So they're having a renewable portfolio standard is what stimulates the industry. If that leaves, then there's a lot less excitement. You know, in this project, because of the federal funding, we believe that we can still go forward with this project, but certainly it impacts the long-term industry development. Having said that, you know, there's an awful lot to be said for what the state and federal policy will be in a few years. It's our view that we think the federal government has invested in the energy infrastructure of our country for a long time, and it's brought us some great things like nuclear energy, like shale gas. There's a 25-year production tax credit to develop shale gas to where it was competitive. That was a great thing. It brought us this tremendous asset we can enjoy today. We see that investment should continue to happen, and offshore wind is just one of those platforms in that portfolio. So, we don't know what the future holds. We do know that this is going to take us through 2017, and we think a lot of things, we'll have to watch and see how it develops. But certainly, SB 221 going away would not be a good thing.
The Siemens decision versus some
GE.
other.
GE was.
Well, I was going to go GE, but
okay,
we'll just leave it generic. But
Yeah.
How much of the Siemens product is actually produced in the United States versus an alternative product?
It's actually ironic because we looked at this. We were partnered with GE, so we had a partnership with GE early on.
I thought that GE was your.
Yeah, and there's a let me kind of walk you through what happened. So GE was partnered. They were bullish on the Great Lakes wind. Great Lakes wind is a little less intense than Atlantic Coast wind. So to get the most out of your capital, you need to really develop a turbine, rotor that kind of meets our requirements. GE was anxious to do that, wanted to do that. They were just getting into the industry. As the couple of years went by, they got kind of cold feet and started to really back off. So they kind of went back and said, we're not interested in developing a turbine for the Great Lakes. We're really much more bearish on offshore wind now. So they really backed off quite a bit. So we said, okay, what do? We had this partnership. We're not going to throw the towel in because GE did. We looked around and said, who already has a turbine that actually could perform well in our wind? And it turns out Siemens did, which wasn't a surprise because they've been in it probably the longest and have the most out there. So we looked at that and said, maybe our innovation ought to be more around how we do it in Lake Erie, take a more known turbine that has a performance record that's going to be really bankable, and focus our work and innovation on the foundations, the deployment, the operations and maintenance strategy. So that's when we sought out Siemens, and through a lot of discussion kind of ended up and looked like that was really the best choice for us. As it turns out, the Siemens turbines will most likely be built in Kansas, which if we had gone with GE, they would have been built in Europe. So just kind of the way it works. So Siemens, as you know, also has a big footprint in land-based wind, and they can use their factory in Kansas for a lot of this. Now, obviously, our long-term vision is, as you build this industry up, that there's more and more that happens locally. We just know that that's going to take a longer time. No one's going to build a factory for 7 turbines. But over time, we would expect that would happen if we're successful.
Maybe they'll spec in molded fiberglass blades out there.
Absolutely.
They're all being made, but part of it in Ashtabula County.
Absolutely. You can imagine, Siemens, they've kind of talked publicly about their formula, from an operational strategy. What are the logistics? What do the volumes look like? That's when they decide to site plant. So I don't think it's any mystery that if this industry takes off, there will be fabrication, especially something like blades, that the logistics are so expensive, then to sell the towers will end up being here. It's just going to take some time.
Well, I think MFG, aren't they building the big ones? They're building.
Yeah, they just don't build them in Ashtabula. They build them in North Dakota,
right.
And Arkansas, right? But they can do it, absolutely. Right. So and if you think about Ashtabula and where MFG is and the ports in Ashtabula, if you think about building out, a couple thousand turbines, it's not all going to be possible out of the Port of Cleveland. So Ashtabula is a great site that could be a great stimulus for that port, and you're looking at MFG in the backyard. So some really exciting opportunities, really exciting.
Thank you.
Just a question. With regard to the state, are there any, I'm sorry if I missed this in your present beginning, state incentives that are available for this project?
So there are some, as Councilman Schron was pointing out, the Renewable Portfolio Standard generates renewable energy credits, which this project then would be eligible for. But there are no other incentives beyond that at this point.
Has there ever been? I've been asking, I asked this last time, I think Mr. Deaver was here, and there was more than what Councilman Schron pot of money.
There have been third frontier proposals made that decisions were based on merit of the project and other reasons that funded some wind projects and other renewable energy products, but as a fixed program incentive, nothing really in the third frontier as far as that goes. Ohio had the Advanced Energy Fund for a while that was really some really favorable loans. That program is no longer active at the state, so that kind of went away a couple of years ago and kind of just kind of died out. For a while, when there were stimulus funds, there were some funds made available to support some projects. And it wasn't specifically for wind, it was kind of a variety of different projects that those programs funded. So that kind of leaves us with right now, what do we have? I think what we're left with now is the RPS.
Okay, and in terms of the bird migration, what consultant's actually doing that study?
So we had some preliminary work done in the feasibility study a few years ago that was led by UV, who's a European developer. And now the updates to those will be done by URS. And that's really URS's role, is to do those environmental permits and those environmental studies to support the permit. Oh, that's right, yeah. Thanks, Steve. Yeah.
What's the status?
That study is complete. I'll be happy to send you.
That would be great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It seems that this project was recently kind of gotten off track, and it appeared that it was kind of fading away. Was this Department of Energy grant kind of the impetus?
This was catalytic. Is catalytic. And if you look at that, your statement really would characterize the whole U.S. offshore industry. So a lot of excitement about 4 years ago, and it started to wane a couple of years ago. And this funding from the Department of Energy, when you look at putting a third to a half of your capital coming from that source, it all of a sudden makes projects possible that weren't possible before. So this is absolutely catalytic, not only for us, but for everyone else in the mix.
Yeah.
And it's, again, I mentioned that their goal is to help stimulate the growth of this industry, and they know, and I think everybody agrees that this will help do that, getting some projects built.
And just to Mr. Schron, I was at a press conference yesterday with Dr. Wagner, and he was speaking about the need to maintain the standards that were set back in 2008 and not to eliminate.
Yeah, we firmly believe we believe in a diversified portfolio of our energy solutions, and don't think that there's any one source that we should bet the farm on. And we think that offshore wind is part of that, not the only plank, but we think it can be a major plank in this strategy.
I hate to ask these elementary questions, but I basically have three questions, and that is the winds stronger offshore than it is on land? That's the first question. The second question is, how deep is the lake?
Okay.
And how deep does ice become? I mean, those are elementary, but
okay, well,
I'm just wondering.
No, those are great questions. I mean, those are great questions. So the first question is the wind stronger on land or sea? So the answer is it depends where you are. I can say is in Ohio, we have some pretty strong winds in the northwest part of the state. That's where you've seen some pretty big wind projects go up. A pretty big one most recently. In the water, if you go a few miles off the coast here of north of Cleveland and get into out of the bay, you have some really strong wind. They call Class 2. So pretty strong. The Atlantic coast and upper Atlantic would be Class 1, stronger. But on land, we kind of don't have too much more than really good wind in the northwest. What you see is you go to the Great Plains states, Dakotas and Kansas and Iowa, they have really strong wind on land. Texas has really strong winds on land. We just don't happen to have that in Ohio. So we think about it that way. And then off the Atlantic coast, the winds are even stronger than they are in the Great Lakes. So that's kind of the answer. One of the things, let me just kind of add a subtext to that point, and I'll answer your other questions. The other big driver, or I guess advantage that you think about with offshore wind is the power is generated. There's a stat that a certain percentage of the people in the U.S. live within so many miles of a coastline. Right? Our population centers are concentrated, heavily along the coast. That's where the high demand for electricity is. When you think of North Dakota, Iowa, and Kansas, you don't think of heavy, dense population centers, right? So how do you get the power and the energy from there to where you need it? So if you start to put the turbines in the water close to the demand points, you really save a lot of this transmission investment you might have to make. So, and if you go to the Atlantic coast, they have a lot less choices on how to generate energy than even we do in Ohio. So put that aside. In terms of depth, it's about 20 meters, about 60 feet is kind of a nominal depth as you go out on the lake. We're actually going to be looking at the subsoil conditions this month to understand that even better. And I'm sorry, the last question, how deep does the ice go? So the ice, it's not so much that the ice freezes that deep, it's many feet, but one of the things you have to worry about is as the ice is encroaching on the turbine, there's a design you can fashion so that when it hits this foundation, it tends to drive it down and break it. So it can be in shallower waters, it can actually kind of bend down and not break until it hits the bottom, and then you have some problems. So you have to design the curvature of the foundation cone, knowing what your depth is to avoid that condition. Again, these are all technical problems that there's been a lot of engineering done in a lot of other structures in the water with ice. And I kind of talked about the guy from Finland that's an icing expert, but even if you look at Lake Erie, there are structures in the water that withstand the ice in Lake Erie. It's a little different for a turbine. You have to understand those forces, but it's a very clear engineering kind of problem to solve. That helps.
So do you have like a fleet of ships that have to go out to?
That's a great question. Vessels are a key part of this, and some of those jobs that I mentioned were not only building the vessels, but also really more so operating the vessels and staffing the vessels. So there are ships and vessels to go deploy the turbines, and then there are smaller vessels that you use to service the turbines. And that's one of the questions that we're assessing now as part of our work is given what we have in the Great Lakes, we don't have the vessels that are used in UK that are building thousands of these, because they could justify investments in that. We have to determine the best way to do that. We're working with like Great Lakes Towing, a great local company, shipbuilder here in the region that is going to be part of this, to understand what the best approach is, not only for the pilot project, but as we scale, what can you justify in terms of investment in vessels in the short term and long term.
Sitting around waiting for something to break down. Right?
There's a vessel being built, a special purpose vessel being built on the Atlantic coast that was designed so that it could come up through the locks, so that they could serve Atlantic coast development and Great Lakes development. So that's one opportunity that will be done about the time we need it. But that's a big issue. There are many approaches that we'll be looking at. We're actually holding a construction innovation workshop at the end of this month. We're bringing our European partners together with our local construction companies, fabricators, and Great Lakes Towing to talk about, okay, here's what we do in Europe. What do you have here? How does this work? What can we learn from you? I think Jeff's expertise from the construction methodologies that he's seen in the region are another good input. But we'll be kind of getting to the crux of a lot of those issues here with the team at the end of the month. So it's pretty exciting. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you. Really appreciate you taking.
So one last comment, if I could.
Okay.
One of the things is that I mentioned we're very excited about building this industry for the economic development, but also as an energy source. So we think about the ability to purchase and power some of the county assets and public assets with energy kind of generated on Lake Erie. It gets pretty exciting. So we'll be coming maybe in a different venue in the future to talk about what some of those options might be and how that might work. But we think it'd be a great statement and a great support mechanism to actually use some of the energy generated from this project to power some of our public assets.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, any miscellaneous business? Any public comment?
No, Madam Chair.
All right, we'll stand adjourned until 5 o'clock. I know. Stand up. Oh.